For more than a century, one name has roared across American highways, louder than almost any other machine on two wheels: Harley-Davidson. To some, Harley-Davidson represents freedom. To others, rebellion, leather jackets, endless highways. The growl of a V-twin engine echoing through small towns and major cities alike. But behind the chrome, behind the mythology, behind the image of the open road, was a factory built in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, by a handful of young men with ambition, mechanical talent, and almost no idea that they were about to create one of the most iconic American empires in history. This is the story of how Harley-Davidson rose from a tiny wooden shed to become a global symbol of American identity. A story filled with innovation, war contracts, labor struggles, financial collapse, fierce competition, and survival against impossible odds. Because Harley-Davidson didn't just build motorcycles, it built an empire. The story begins in the early 1900s in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. America was changing rapidly. Factories were expanding, railroads connected cities, industrialization was transforming everyday life. At the center of this changing America were two young friends, William S. Harley and Arthur Davidson. William Harley was fascinated by engineering from a young age. He loved bicycles and mechanics, constantly sketching ideas for small engines. Arthur Davidson came from a hard-working Scottish immigrant family and shared the same obsession with machinery. At the time, bicycles were booming across America, but Harley and Davidson had bigger ideas. They wanted to create a motorized bicycle. In 1903, in a tiny wooden shed behind the Davidson family home, they began building their first machine. That little shed would later become legendary. The first prototype was underpowered and struggled on Milwaukee's steep hills. But instead of giving up, the pair redesigned the engine completely. Soon, Arthur's brothers, Walter and William Davidson, joined the project. Together, the four men formed what would become Harley-Davidson. The company's first factory was primitive. No giant assembly lines, no roaring industrial complex. Just a cramped workshop filled with tools, oil, noise, and determination. But demand began growing quickly. America was becoming fascinated with motorcycles, and Harley-Davidson arrived at exactly the right moment. By 1906, the tiny wooden shed was no longer enough. The company constructed its first real factory on Juneau Avenue in Milwaukee. That address would become one of the most famous manufacturing sites in American history. Inside the factory, workers assembled motorcycles almost entirely by hand. Early Harley motorcycles were rugged and simple, but reliability became their biggest selling point. The company quickly gained a reputation for machines that could survive rough roads, long distances, and brutal weather conditions. At a time when many motorcycle companies were failing, Harley-Davidson focused heavily on engineering improvements. One of the biggest breakthroughs came with the V-twin engine. Introduced in 1909, the V-twin gave Harley motorcycles more power, more torque, and a sound that would later become legendary. That deep, rumbling exhaust note became part of the Harley identity itself. Meanwhile, the factory kept expanding. Production increased every year. By the early 1910s, Harley-Davidson motorcycles were being shipped across America. The factory had transformed from a small workshop into a booming industrial operation. And then the government came calling. When World War I erupted in Europe, motorcycles became incredibly valuable military tools. They were fast, reliable, perfect for carrying messages, scouting terrain, and transporting soldiers. The United States military turned to Harley-Davidson for help. The Milwaukee factory suddenly became a wartime production machine. Thousands of motorcycles rolled off the assembly lines, destined for military service overseas. By the end of World War I, nearly half of all Harley-Davidson production was going directly to the military. For the company, the war changed everything. Military contracts brought massive profits and expanded the factory dramatically. But it also strengthened Harley-Davidson's image as a symbol of toughness and patriotism. Soldiers returning home already knew the Harley name, and many wanted motorcycles of their own. The company emerged from World War I stronger than ever. In fact, by the 1920s, Harley-Davidson had become one of the largest motorcycle manufacturers in the world. At one point, Harley motorcycles were sold in more than 60 countries. The empire was growing fast. The 1920s became Harley-Davidson's golden era. Harley motorcycles became larger, faster, and more stylish. The company introduced innovations like front brakes, stronger engines, and improved suspension systems. But Harley-Davidson also understood something deeper. They weren't just selling transportation anymore. They were selling identity. Harley riders became part of a growing culture. Police departments adopted Harley motorcycles. Racers used them in competitions. Young Americans dreamed about them. The company's reputation spread everywhere. But then came the Great Depression. And suddenly, the entire empire was in danger. When the stock market crashed in 1929, industries across America collapsed. Factories shut down. Workers lost their jobs. Companies disappeared almost overnight. Motorcycles were considered luxury items, and luxury items stopped selling. Harley-Davidson sales plummeted. The Milwaukee factory faced one of the greatest crises in its history. Many motorcycle companies simply vanished during the Depression years. But Harley-Davidson survived, partly because of loyal customers, partly because of careful management, and partly because the company diversified. The factory produced industrial engines and alternative products to stay alive. Harley also continued investing in engineering, even during the worst financial years. It was more powerful, more modern, and visually distinctive. The engine helped revive Harley's image and kept the company moving forward during difficult times. When America entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, the Harley-Davidson factory transformed almost overnight. Civilian production slowed dramatically. Military production exploded. The factory became part of America's wartime industrial machine. Workers built military motorcycles around the clock. One of the most famous was the Harley-Davidson WLA. Nicknamed the Liberator, the WLA became one of the most recognizable Allied motorcycles of the war. The company produced nearly 90,000 military motorcycles during the war. Inside the factory, production never stopped. Workers faced enormous pressure to meet military demand. Many employees worked exhausting shifts. Women entered factory positions in greater numbers as men left for military service. The Harley-Davidson factory became a symbol of wartime American manufacturing power. And when the war ended, Harley-Davidson's patriotic image became even stronger. After World War II, motorcycle culture changed dramatically. Returning veterans wanted excitement and freedom. Many former soldiers purchased motorcycles, including Harleys. Clubs formed across America. Road trips became popular. And slowly, a rebellious biker image began emerging. It was dangerous, rebellious, cool. The company benefited from the image, even if it sometimes created controversy. By the late 1960s and 1970s, Japanese motorcycle manufacturers entered the American market aggressively. Companies like Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki were producing motorcycles that were cheaper, smoother, lighter, and often more reliable. Harley-Davidson struggled badly. Its factory systems were aging. Quality control problems appeared. Oil leaks, mechanical issues, and inconsistent manufacturing hurt the company's reputation. Meanwhile, Japanese factories were becoming incredibly efficient. Harley-Davidson suddenly looked outdated. Things became even worse after the company merged with AMF, the American Machine and Foundry Company, in 1969. AMF focused heavily on mass production and profit. Many long-time Harley workers and riders believed quality declined sharply during this period. The Harley image suffered badly. By the late 1970s, Harley-Davidson was in serious danger of collapse. The motorcycle empire that once dominated America was now fighting for survival. In 1981, a group of Harley-Davidson executives made a bold move. They bought the company back from AMF. It was a massive gamble, but they believed Harley-Davidson could still be saved. The new leadership focused intensely on improving quality. Inside the factory, manufacturing processes were modernized. Inspired partly by Japanese production methods, Harley implemented new systems focused on efficiency and consistency. Workers became deeply involved in quality control improvements. The company also leaned harder into its identity. The company introduced the Harley Owners Group, known as HOG, which helped build one of the strongest customer communities in the world. The factory became more than a workplace. It became part of an American comeback story. And during the 1980s and 1990s, Harley-Davidson experienced an incredible revival. As Harley-Davidson entered the modern era, its factories became far more advanced. Robotics appeared on assembly lines. Computerized systems improved production. But unlike many competitors, Harley still emphasized craftsmanship and tradition. Visitors touring the Milwaukee factory often described a mixture of old-school industry and modern manufacturing. Harley-Davidson understood the power of nostalgia. The company carefully protected its image while modernizing behind the scenes. And globally, Harley became enormous. The brand expanded into clothing, merchandise, events, and tourism. For many people, owning a Harley wasn't simply about transportation. It became a lifestyle statement. Tattoo culture, biker rallies, leather jackets, and roaring engines all became linked to the Harley image. Few companies in the world managed to build such a powerful emotional connection with customers. But the modern world was changing again, and Harley-Davidson faced a new generation of problems. By the 2000s and 2010s, Harley-Davidson faced declining sales among younger riders. The company's core audience was aging. Younger generations often preferred sport bikes, cheaper motorcycles, or entirely different lifestyles. Urbanization changed transportation habits. Environmental concerns increased. Fuel prices fluctuated, and motorcycles themselves became less central to American culture than they once were. The factory workforce also changed dramatically. Automation reduced labor needs. Manufacturing jobs across America declined. Harley-Davidson faced criticism over outsourcing some production overseas. For a brand built around American identity, this sparked controversy among loyal fans. At the same time, the company struggled to balance tradition with innovation. Electric motorcycles were introduced, including the Livewire project. Some welcomed the innovation. Others felt electric bikes betrayed Harley's classic identity. Today, the Harley-Davidson factory remains one of the most recognizable industrial symbols in America. The original Milwaukee site stands as a reminder of where it all began. From a tiny wooden shed to a global empire, millions of motorcycles have rolled off Harley-Davidson assembly lines over the last century, each carrying part of the company's identity with it. The Harley story is ultimately a story about American industry itself. Innovation, expansion, war production, reinvention. The company survived world wars, depressions, foreign competition, cultural shifts, and financial crises. Very few American manufacturing brands can say the same, and perhaps that's why Harley-Davidson still matters. Not just because of the motorcycles, but because the company represents an older vision of America. Factories roaring with activity, workers building machines by hand, the promise of freedom on the open road. Even now, when a Harley engine rumbles to life, it carries echoes of that original wooden shed in Milwaukee. The dreams of 4 young men, and the birth of a motorcycle empire. Every summer, the quiet town of Sturgis, South Dakota, transforms completely. The population explodes, the roads shake with thunder, and the sound echoing through the Black Hills isn't traffic. It's Harley-Davidson. The Sturgis Motorcycle Rally became one of the biggest motorcycle gatherings in the world. What started in 1938 as a small racing event slowly evolved into something much bigger, a celebration of motorcycle culture itself. By the late 20th century, hundreds of thousands of riders were arriving every year. And for Harley-Davidson, Sturgis became priceless advertising. Rows of chrome-lined Harleys stretched for miles, custom bikes, leather vests, massive biker clubs. For many riders, owning a Harley wasn't enough anymore. They wanted to belong to something larger, and Harley-Davidson understood this better than almost any company on earth. The factory wasn't simply building motorcycles now, it was manufacturing identity. Harley-branded clothing exploded in popularity. People who didn't even ride motorcycles started wearing Harley-Davidson merchandise. The company had crossed into pop culture, and nowhere showed that more clearly than Sturgis. But behind the scenes, Harley executives understood something dangerous. The company's image was becoming heavily tied to aging riders. Many of the bikers attending rallies had grown up in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And Harley's future depended on attracting a younger audience. The problem was, younger generations were changing. Sport bikes were becoming more popular. Technology was evolving rapidly, and suddenly Harley-Davidson risked becoming trapped in nostalgia. The company needed a new direction, or the empire could slowly fade away. For over 100 years, Harley-Davidson motorcycles were known for one thing above all else: noise. That deep, aggressive V-twin rumble became part of American culture itself. But in the 21st century, the motorcycle industry faced enormous pressure to evolve. Environmental regulations tightened. Electric vehicles began taking over the automotive world. And Harley-Davidson faced a terrifying question. What happens when the future no longer sounds like a Harley? The answer came in the form of the Livewire, Harley-Davidson's first major electric motorcycle project. Inside the company, the decision was controversial from the very beginning. Some executives believed Harley had no choice. If the company refused to modernize, it risked becoming irrelevant. Others feared electric motorcycles would destroy the very identity Harley-Davidson had spent generations building. Because Harley wasn't just selling transportation, it was selling emotion, the sound, the vibration, the mechanical feeling of raw American machinery. Could an electric Harley ever recreate that? The Livewire launched with massive attention. Some praised Harley-Davidson for finally embracing the future. The motorcycle was fast, modern, and technologically advanced, but many traditional Harley riders hated it instantly. To them, an electric Harley wasn't a real Harley at all. And the biggest problem was the price. The Livewire was expensive, very expensive. Sales struggled. The project became one of the most divisive moments in Harley-Davidson history. Yet despite the criticism, the electric gamble revealed something important. Harley-Davidson knew the world was changing, and for over a century, survival had always depended on adaptation. The company had survived world wars, the Great Depression, Japanese competition, factory crises, and financial collapse. Now it faced a new battle. Can a company built on American tradition survive in a modern electric future? Nobody truly knows the answer yet. But one thing is certain: as long as Harley-Davidson motorcycles continue rolling out of American factories, the legend of the motorcycle empire lives on. The Harley-Davidson factory helped shape American motorcycle history for more than 120 years. It survived impossible odds. It transformed from a backyard workshop into one of the most iconic manufacturing brands on earth. And whether you love motorcycles or not, there's no denying the impact Harley-Davidson had on American culture. Because Harley didn't just build machines, it built legends, and the sound of that legend still echoes across highways today. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the rise and fall of America's greatest industrial empires.